Alright, this coming week is shaped by four big threads. A record-long federal shutdown that started to hit flights, food aid, and healthcare costs. A Supreme Court fight over food assistance in the middle of that shutdown. A Democratic socialist just elected to mayor of New York City. And an escalating U.S. military campaign against boats near Venezuela and across the Caribbean. All of these hit the same pressure points: centralization of power, economic fragility, and how quickly things can move from politics as usual to real-world impacts on your freedom, income, and safety. Welcome to Modern Frontiersmen. Most people train, but they don't track. They go to the range, they run drills, they sweat, and then they forget what actually worked. That's the difference between the guy who plays soldier and the one who gets better every single time. I built the Minuteman Field Admin Pack for that reason. It's 10 proven templates, after-action reports, salute reports, gear checklists, mission planners, all adapted from real military systems, but simplified for civilians who train with purpose. This isn't just paperwork, it's progress, it's discipline, it's the difference between guessing and growing. These are the same methods we used in Iraq to keep Marines alive. Now you can use them to make your team sharper, faster, and more accountable. Get the Modern Frontiersman Field Admin Pack at modernfrontiersman.com or join the 7-day Grid Down Challenge and you actually get it absolutely free. I just give it to you. So stop training blind, start training like it matters. I'm Josh, and this is your weekly threat briefing for American preppers for the week of November 10th through 16th. Being that we are shut down on YouTube this week, this video is going out on probably Rumble and on Telegram, so if you're not following in either of those places, be sure to do so. So first up, we have political violence and civil unrest as our first category. Well, the U.S. federal government shutdown has now hit its 40th day as of Friday, November 7th. Senators stayed in Washington over the weekend trying to find a deal to reopen the government. The shutdown is no longer just a D.C. story. The Federal Aviation Administration has begun cutting air traffic capacity, reducing coverage for about 4% of flights at 40 airports, which has already led airlines to cancel more than 2,500 flights over the weekend due to staffing shortages at radar centers and control towers. Senate Republican leader John Thune says they are only a handful of votes away from a short-term deal to fund the government until November 21st, but they still need 5 more votes. The shutdown affects millions of federal workers and contractors, and it's starting to touch the daily lives of non-government citizens through travel, benefits, and service delays. Why does this matter for liberty and safety? When the shutdown drags on, services become unreliable, travel, courts, benefits, inspections. People who depend on federal paychecks or benefits get desperate. The combination is fertile ground for localized unrest, protests, clashes at government offices, or crime rising in areas hit hardest. It also sets stage for calls for extraordinary measures by the executive branch, emergency powers, deployment of federal forces, or other moves that chip away at normal checks and balances. Indicators to watch for on this: whether the Senate passes a short-term spending bill by midweek or negotiations stall again. More flight disruptions along security lines or reduced airport operations in your region. Any announcement of protests or walkouts by federal workers, air traffic staff, or unions. The realistic threat level is moderate on this. Nationwide meltdown is unlikely this week, but localized stress, travel chaos, and frustration are already real and can escalate into flashpoints. Some preparation steps for you, because there's no point in talking about these things unless we're talking about actionable things that we can do. Number 1, avoid unnecessary air travel until things stabilize. If you must fly, have backup plans for delays or cancellations. 2, we keep enough food, fuel, and cash on hand so you are not dependent on last-minute travel or just-in-time delivery systems. If you live in or near a capital or federal hub, stay aware of possible demonstrations or agency shutdowns and plan alternate routes. Treat the shutdown as a live-fire drill for how fragile centralized services really are, and adjust your long-term prepping accordingly. Terrorism and war spillover. We want to talk about Venezuela and the Caribbean some more. The United States has ramped up its lethal strikes on boats near Venezuela and in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, allegedly targeting drug smuggling vessels tied to groups the U.S. calls terrorist organizations. You know, we can throw out that T word and everybody's all about it. Since September, the U.S. has carried out at least 14 strikes on vessels near the Venezuelan coast and the Eastern Pacific, killing at least 69 people, according to the Secretary of Defense. Previous reporting counted at least 13 strikes, killing about 57 people from Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. A new strike this past week killed 3 men on a boat in the Caribbean. United Nations experts have called these strikes in international waters a dangerous escalation and likened them to extrajudicial executions, warning they may breach international law. President Trump publicly said he is not considering strikes inside Venezuela, even as the U.S. builds up military presence in the region and authorizes operations against vessels just offshore. But I remember him saying recently that it was not off the table, that it was being considered. The U.S. Senate blocked a resolution that would have restricted Trump's authority to carry out these boat strikes, effectively giving him continued latitude to authorize them. Why it matters for liberty and safety, even if you never leave the U.S., this matters. Escalation near Venezuela risks blowback. Cyber attacks, proxy operations, or regional instability that can hit energy markets and migration patterns. The war powers debate being brushed aside, Senate blocking limits on strikes, is another example of the executive branch stretching military authority with thin congressional restraint. Normalizing lethal force in gray zone operations makes it easier to justify other extraordinary uses of force. Indicators to watch for on this: any new reported strike near Venezuela or the Caribbean, changes in oil prices or shipping disruptions tied to the region, attempts in Congress to reassert war powers and whether they fail again, Venezuelan or regional responses, legal, diplomatic, or military. The realistic threat level for you is low to moderate for direct physical impact on U.S. soil and moderate for knock-on effects. Energy prices, cyber risk, regional instability, more executive war making without oversight. Prep steps for you: top off fuel and consider a small buffer stock of gas or diesel safely stored. If you rely on imported goods or parts, which you do, even if you say you don't, assume delays and price swings. Buy ahead on critical items, not luxury ones. Treat the situation as another reminder that war decisions aren't always transparent. Build your life so you're less exposed to global shocks. Local food sources, local skills, diversified income, and follow the developments from multiple sources, not just government statements. Number 3, government overreach and liberty risks. These 3 separate developments all point in the same direction: more central power, less predictability for regular people. 1, the shutdown and healthcare subsidies. The shutdown fight is partly about whether to extend federal subsidies for health law marketplace plans. If these subsidies lapse, some estimates suggest premiums on those exchanges could go up more than double next year for many users. And then we have SNAP pulled into the shutdown fight. Lower courts ordered the federal government to use an emergency reserve fund of about $4.6 billion to keep November Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, benefits flowing, which cost $8.9 to $9 billion per month. The Trump administration appealed, saying it could not exceed contingency funds during the shutdown. On Friday, the Supreme Court granted emergency requests and temporarily blocked full payments, pausing lower court orders that required full November benefits. The result? Millions of people are now in limbo. Some states issued benefits, others are waiting, and no one has clarity for December. Number 3, Zohran Mamdani, mayor of New York City. New York City just elected Zohran Mamdani, a 34-year-old self-described democratic socialist, as mayor. He's the city's youngest mayor in over a century and the first Muslim mayor. His platform includes rent freezes, a $30 city minimum wage, free bus transit, higher taxes on the wealthy, universal child care, and even ideas like city-run groceries and aggressive public housing expansions. So, from a strictly libertarian perspective, Mamdani's win is a clear voter signal toward more centralized redistributionist city policy and one of the most important economic hubs in the country. If we are electing people who are openly socialist, where do we go from here? Why does this matter for your liberty and safety? Well, when food aid and healthcare access becomes political leverage in a shutdown, it shows how easily regular people can be used as hostages in federal power struggles. The Supreme Court's emergency order means 9 unelected justices could suddenly change household food access for 1 in 8 Americans with a single signature. The election of an openly socialist mayor in New York City is a barometer. If a city that large turns hard towards state-heavy economic management, you can expect more regulation, more taxation, and more pressure on individual economic freedom, and a model that other cities might try to follow. So what are some indicators to watch on this? Whether Congress actually restores funding and subsidies before November 21st. Follow-up rulings on the food stamp program, and whether the Supreme Court keeps the pause in place or narrows it. And early policy moves from Mayor-elect Mamdani's transition team, especially with housing, policing, taxation, and public ownership experiments. Realistic risk levels. High for long-term liberty risk. Moderate in the short term. None of this will actually collapse the system this week, but it's a clear push towards more centralized control over food, healthcare, and urban life. Prep steps. If you rely on any government benefit, food, health, disability, treat it as proof it can be cut, altered, or politicized overnight. Build non-government ways to meet your basics. Pantry, side income, community. Stop relying on the government. 2, track your local city and county politics. New York is a bellwether, but local councils can quietly push similar ideas. Rent control, gun rules, business restrictions. Keep essential documents and proof of income offline and organized. If rules shift or systems glitch, you want to be ready to pivot without waiting on bureaucrats. Invest in skills and assets that are useful regardless of which ideology is in power. Food production, trades, repair skills, mutual aid networks. Okay, so we have some severe weather threats coming up this week. We are in a full seasonal transition right now. A frigid air mass is pushing into the central United States, then east early in the week. Parts of Michigan and the upper Midwest are seeing lake effect snow and early winter systems with several inches possible and hazardous travel. Looking slightly ahead, an atmospheric river is expected to bring heavy rain to California with snow in the Sierra Nevada by mid to late week. Why it matters for liberty and safety. Weather is the simplest but most common threat. Power grid under winter load can fail. Roads can become dangerous or impassable, especially in rural areas. If supply chains are already stressed, storms make restocking slower. So you need to winterize pipes, heaters, and vehicles now, not when the storm is on top of you. Make sure you can stay warm without grid power. Blankets, safe, alternate heat. Fire, in my opinion. Keep 3 to 7 days of food and water that do not rely on refrigeration. If you live in a flood or slide-prone area, pre-stage sandbags and have an evacuation route. All right, so that wraps up for this week. Let's a quick summary. Top likely threats this week. The 40-day shutdown expanded into deeper travel, benefit, and service disruption. Supreme Court-driven uncertainty over food aid for millions. Escalating U.S. strikes on boats near Venezuela and the Caribbean with weak war powers restraints. A newly elected Democratic socialist mayor of New York signaling a stronger push towards state-heavy urban policy, increased cyber risk due to activity-exploited vulnerabilities, and a distracted federal government. And finally, early winter weather and an upcoming atmospheric river event threatening power, travel, and logistics to parts of the United States. Top 5 prepper actions for this week. Top off fuel, food, water, and meds now before prices or availability shift. Build or test backup power and heat. Assume short-term outages. Get some cash and barter goods on hand. Do not rely solely on plastic and apps. Harden your digital life. Updates, backups, offline copies, and a plan for operating without the internet. And finally, strengthen your local human network. People nearby are worth more than a policy promise from Washington. All right? Your freedom isn't guaranteed by whoever sits in the office. I say this all the time. It's built on your ability to stand on your own 2 feet when the system shakes. As always, stay self-reliant.